Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. It's me, your favorite Ohio. So today we're going to be doing our 2022 governor's prediction as of today, which is May 6th, 2022. It's really come up very fast, I must say. We have some big primaries this month in North Carolina, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. A lot of important primaries coming up in Georgia as well, I believe. And so we're getting very close to the midterms. So with that, let's start filling in the state Republican states. They include states of Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, my great home state of Ohio, Alaska, Vermont, New Hampshire, and I believe that is it. Yes, that is all the safe Republican states. Most of these should be pretty self-explanatory. For those of you who do not know, Vermont and New Hampshire are both safe Republican because there are two Rockefeller Republicans, very moderate Republicans who are very popular governors up there. They won by re-election by like 30, 40 points back in 2020 and 2018. So they're going to win very handily, both Chris Sununu and Phil Scott. I'm not the biggest fan of them, but overall, you know what? They're moderate in the issues. They're well liked in their states. So if they like them, they're their governor, not mine. So go ahead. My great home state of Ohio is going to be safe because DeWine is doing very well in the polls against Dan Whaley. He's up by like 15, 20 points. And a lot of moderate Democrats are probably going to vote for him as well because Dan Whaley is actually relatively polarizing. She's pretty far to the left, especially for a state like Ohio, which is very Republican trending, relatively blue collar state. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Democrats actually flipped and supported DeWine because he's more moderate against the more left leaning Dan Whaley. The state of Iowa is also safe because Kim Reynolds is relatively popular. She won in a blue wave year back in 2018 by like 6 or 7 points. So she should win by easily more than 10, probably like 11, 12, 13. And I'm thinking about it right now. I'm debating whether we should put Texas and Florida is safe. Um, I'm going back and forth. Texas, I can probably see, and you know what? Let's go all in, boys. Let's put Texas and Florida as both safe for the Republican Party. Ron DeSantis instead of Florida is probably going to win by more than 10 points. For a while, I had him winning by like 8 to 9. I thought, he probably won't win by 10. But now that I'm looking at it now, I think he will win by 10. He's very popular. He's up by like 20 points against Nikki Fried. Charlie Crist, it's going to be a little bit more competitive, but against Nikki Fried, who's the Florida Agricultural Commissioner, who really her only claim to fame is unsuccessfully suing the state of Georgia because of and shilling for illegal weed. That's really all she's known for. But so if she's the nominee, she'll probably lose by more than 10. Charlie Crist it'll be pretty close to being 9 to 10 points, but I think Ron DeSantis will win by more than 10 points because he's just very popular. I mean, he's completely changed the entire dynamic of the state of Florida. The state of Texas, similar story. Beto O'Rourke has gone all in. He basically knows he's going to lose at this point, so he's just going full in left mode, want to get as many donations as he can from the woke liberals from California. And really, not much to say there. Greg Abbott's probably going to win by re-election by about 13 points. Now we're from the safe Democrat states. They include states of California, Hawaii, Maryland. Going to flip that from Larry Hogan because Larry Hogan's term limited. Probably New York, although New York could get interesting. Probably Massachusetts because Charlie Baker is retiring and the Republican running is like a Q boomer. And really, that's it. These are the only safe Democratic governorships. Really, New York could get interesting because Lee Zeldin is running a very good campaign. He's more likely than not going to be the Republican nominee to take on Kathy Hochul, and Kathy Hochul isn't very well liked in the state, and she's very polarizing. Isn't very well liked, and Lee Zeldin's running a very good campaign. And some polls have showed the race getting a little bit tighter. That those are Republican leaning polls though, so I kind of take those with a grain of salt. But still, I think the race is going to be closer than people expect. I think that if Andrew Cuomo runs as independent just to screw over the Democrats because they made him abdicate his throne as governor of New York, I think that's that's a big possibility. But if that does happen, I think New York becomes very competitive, basically overnight. But I don't really think there's a high chance of that happening. I mean, it's always possible. We'll have to wait and see. But I just don't see Andrew Cuomo running. And so that I think Kathy Hochul a little bit closer than people expect, but I do think Kathy Hochul will defeat Lee Zeldin by a safe margin, definitely more than 10. Similar story with Massachusetts. Normally, Massachusetts we put in the safe Republican column because of Charlie Baker, who is very similar to Chris Sununu and Phil Scott. He's a very moderate, more libertarian-esque Republican, and he retired. And the Republican who's leading the nomination is a guy he's like an audit all 50 states kind of guy. He wants them to audit Massachusetts, which anyone who knows politics knows that I doubt Massachusetts was stolen. Massachusetts is like one of the most safe Democratic states in the country. It's like California of the Northeast. So the fact that this guy's whole thing is we need to audit Massachusetts, it's like, come on, man, really? So he's not going to win in Massachusetts. Going to be safe Democratic. Let's start filling the likely states for the Democrats. They include states of Illinois, Colorado, Rhode Island, and I believe that is it. Yes. Now, the state of Colorado, Colorado, I would have it put it as lean to maybe tilt, but the incumbent governor Jared Polis is very popular in the state. He appeals to moderate Republicans, to everything from moderate Republican suburbanite types to like super far left progressive Bernie Bros. He's just very popular in the state, and I think he'll win re-election by a likely margin at least. State of Illinois, similar story there, or kind of the opposite story there. J.B. Pritzker is not very well liked, and he's alienating a lot of more moderate suburban types because of his rhetoric on inflation, but defunding the police and other stuff. So there are a lot of good candidates in Illinois who are trying to challenge him. It really just depends on who the nominee is. But I think J.B. Pritzker could be in a little bit of trouble. I don't think he's going to lose. But I think this Illinois gubernatorial election will be a lot closer than people expect, just simply because J.B. Pritzker is not very well liked, especially among the suburbanites who are key to his victory back in 2018 and Biden's victory in 2020. So Illinois might narrow up a little bit, might be like might only go to the Democrats by like 7-8 points, but I do believe that Democrats will hang on. Rhode Island's always at least a little bit competitive. Especially in wave years, and it's a slightly more Republican trending state. If we get a good candidate, I think it'll be under 10, but it could be safe. We'll really have to wait and see. The likely states for the Republicans include the states of Kansas, and I believe that is it. You could make the argument for Wisconsin. Tony Evers losing by more than 5 points. I don't really see it right now. I think Kansas is the only likely Republican state, and that is because the incumbent governor of Kansas is actually a Democrat. Her name is Laura Kelly, and she knows she's losing at this point. She's in Kansas, a very rural, like pretty much farm country and Christianity kind of state, and very conservative. And she is basically governing like she's in California. She knows she's gonna lose. She was actually kind of moderate for a little bit, but as things just went on, and she saw the writing on the wall, she knows she's not gonna win. She's just going full on progressive almost mode. So I'm exaggerating a bit. But for a state like Kansas, she's being much more liberal than she probably should be if she has any intentions of winning in 2022. And because of that, I think she's gonna win. She's gonna lose by a likely margin. I mean, she literally only won because a third party split the Republican vote back in 2018. So in a Republican wave year, when she's governing pretty liberal for her state, I see no reason she won't lose by more than 5, maybe even 10 points. She could lose by a safe margin if we're honest. The lean states now for the Democrats include the states of Connecticut, actually Oregon. We'll get to that in a second, and Minnesota. The state of Oregon, we're going to start there. Now, Oregon, and people are probably going to say I'm crazy for putting Oregon as lean. With the third party vote being split by Betsy Johnson, the former state senator who appeals to more progressive Democrat types, and the Republicans having actually a couple good nominees in the state, I would not be surprised if the Republicans got this race very competitive. I actually considered putting it as tilt Democrat, but I thought that's a little too extreme. I'll wait for some more polls to come out. We'll give it time. But Oregon, I could seriously see going to the Republicans this cycle. It's very possible. We have a couple strong Republican nominees who will do very well. We have a Democratic nominee who's very polarizing, and we have a third-party vote who's going to split a lot of the progressive into progressive types. And so I would not be surprised if Oregon actually flipped the Republicans. As of now, I think it's going to just lean to the Democrats. I think that the former state house majority leader, who's most likely going to be the Democratic nominee, I think she'll win by like 3-4 points. If Betsy Johnson doesn't split the vote, it'll probably be likely, maybe even safe. But I do think Betsy Johnson takes at least 8-9-10% of the vote, making the Democrat candidate probably only win by like 2-3 points. We'll have to wait and see if it gets any more competitive than that. But for now, I think it's gonna be pretty close. Minnesota, the main Republican nominee is Scott Jensen, who is endorsed by like a bunch of Black Lives Matter supporters. So he's a good fit for the state, I guess. But like he's trying to appeal too hard to the Minneapolis suburbs, which are just never going to vote for him. If he needs to find a good balance between appealing to those what few moderate suburban types are left in Minneapolis and the more rural working class types. Overall, I just don't think he's running that great of a campaign. I think he'll lose by a very narrow margin, but I think he will still lose. So the state of Connecticut was very competitive back in 2018. Ned Lamont, the incumbent governor, a Democrat, he only won by like a few points back in 2018. It was actually very super close. But his approval rating has gone up. People like his handling of COVID and his stances on social issues in the state. So I think he'll win re-election, probably only by a lean margin, because Bob Stefankowski, the guy who made it close back in 2018, is running again, and he's ran a pretty good campaign from what I've seen. So the lean Republican states include the states of Arizona, Nevada, probably Georgia, and Wisconsin. The state of Nevada, not much to say about that. It looks like looks like Lombardo, the former former Clark County sheriff, or I believe he might even be the current Clark County sheriff, but I believe he's formal. He's the former. He received the Trump endorsement. He's doing much better in the polls from what we've seen. It looks more likely than not he's going to be the nominee. And this guy is an electoral juggernaut. I think he's going to win, but relatively handily based on looking at him. Originally, I supported John Lee, but I think Joe Lombardo is the man as of now. This guy is pretty socially conservative. He's very anti-immigration. He's a solid Republican candidate, and he has managed to win in Clark County, which is a Democratic-leaning county. It's like D+5, D+10, and very Hispanics, where Las Vegas is. So think of Las Vegas, like liberal types. A bunch of people like that live there. He's managed to win a re-election as the sheriff of that county several times. He's actually very well liked in that county. I think it's going to carry over the general, especially among Hispanics who are disenfranchised with the Democratic Party becoming more social liberal. And with that, I think he'll have no problem winning by a lean margin. In the state of Arizona, Kari Lake is more likely than not going to be the Republican nominee. She's the former news anchor. She's relatively popular, and she's a little far out there with some of her stints on social issues, but really, honestly, she's not bad. She's a great candidate. She's really not even that far out there on social issues, and even then, I don't think it's going to cost her in Arizona. I think there's the national environment and people being so anti-Biden, and considering the fact that she's running against the Bernie bro, a lot of the more McCain, more moderate Republican types will back Kari Lake over Bernie Sanders type. I think any McCain fan would prefer Trump over Bernie Sanders, and that's what they're going to get in Arizona. And so I think those people that maybe voted for Biden and just don't like Trump are going to turn out for Kari Lake, and Kari Lake's probably going to win by 2, 3, maybe even 4 points, and she's going to be a great governor of the state of Arizona. The state of Georgia, Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp and David Perdue it looks like it's going to be a pretty close match, although I think Brian Kemp has the lead for the Republican primary. It's going to be pretty close, but I think that as of now, Brian Kemp is leading that race. We'll have to wait and see, though. Primary is later this month. That'll be an interesting one to look at. But David Perdue, either Perdue or Kemp should beat Stacey Abrams. I think it'll be closer than people expect. A lot of people say, "Oh, Stacey Abrams, she's an awful candidate." She's not. She's really not that bad. She'll energize turnout among African Americans and suburban types in Atlanta. And depending on who the Republican nominee is, they may not energize turnout. If it's Perdue, then he's probably not going to energize those more moderate Republicans in Atlanta. Well, if it's Kemp, he's probably not going to energize the Republican base in the more rural parts of the state. And so, really, I think this race is going to be closer than people expect. But I do think the GOP will win it no matter what. I think Perdue will win probably by like a point or two, and Kemp will probably win by like 3 to 4. I prefer, even though I think Perdue will win by a smaller margin, I do prefer David Perdue. He's better on the issues. He's a great guy, and I prefer Perdue over Kemp. But I do agree that Kemp would probably perform better than Perdue in the general. The state of Wisconsin, Tony Evers has basically given up. He tried running as governing as a moderate, but the Republican state legislature just blocked everything. So he went full on Bernie bro, and the Republican legislature still kept blocking everything. So basically, this guy is just goes to work every day. Tony Evers, the governor of Wisconsin, he's a Democrat. He basically just goes to work every day, and nothing gets passed because the Republican state legislature just denies anything he tries to push. And then he virtue signals on Twitter to liberals in California, and he basically acts like he's this like progressive type when it just kind of sits there as the GOP blocks everything he sends. And with Wisconsin being a Republican trending state, I see no reason this guy is going to win a re-election. Tony Evers is a clown. He's going to lose by like 4. That's why I consider putting Wisconsin as likely, but I think it's going to lean for now. The tilt states for the GOP include states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, Maine, and New Mexico, and these are all the states remaining. The state outside the state of New Mexico is probably the most controversial. Mark Ronchetti, who was a former meteorologist from the great state of New Mexico, he was a very popular meteorologist on one of, I believe, Albuquerque's or Santa Fe's biggest news channels. He ran for the Senate back in 2020. He outperformed Trump. He only lost by like 4 or 5, I think 5 or 6 points. He ran a great campaign, and this guy is well liked in Arizona. He's a solid. Not only is he solid on the issues, he's relatively conservative, but he's just well liked in the state. I don't know, something about weatherman meteorologist type. The people there like him, and he's running against a very unpopular Democratic governor. This lady was involved in a sexual harassment claim, which no one talks about like outside of New Mexico, but it's a huge deal there because the fact that their governor was basically sued for sexually harassing her staff, and basically nothing happened. A lot of people are upset about that, and in a Republican favorable environment against the Democrat with some scandals, I see no reason that Mark Ronchetti, who's a very electable, very solid Republican, will not win this race. I Mark Ronchetti, I guess he's a great guy. He's great on the issues. He's a great candidate. He's going against a very unpopular Democratic governor. The polls have this race razor thin, and you know that they're favoring the Democrat, especially for like New Mexico. So I see no reason that Mark Ronchetti won't win by a tilt margin. The state of Michigan, I think that either James Craig or Tudor Dixon, or really anyone, except maybe I think Garrett Soldano would lose to Gretchen Whitmer. But I think the two most likely Republicans to take on Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan are Tudor Dixon, who is a conservative political commentator, and James Craig. I think either of them would go. The former police chief of Detroit. I think either of them would go on to win against Gretchen Whitmer. It would be it's going to be close than people expect. Gretchen Whitmer is a very strong incumbent. I'm not going to lie, but I think her COVID issues and her social stances are going to hurt her a lot, especially in a blue collar state like Michigan. If they just get that blue collar working class turnout, they turn the tables with suburbanites based on the inflation issue. I think Gretchen Whitmer goes down by about a point or so. Either one of them should win. Just really going to come down to who you prefer. It's a similar story with Pennsylvania. Although Tom Wolf is retiring, he's super unpopular. This guy is basically shilling for mask mandates in Pennsylvania. He's supporting Philadelphia, reinstating the mask mandate. He's pushed for the vaccine, which is honestly outside of the Philadelphia area, not that popular in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is going to be close just because Philadelphia is such a huge metro, and the Republicans running are they're good, but they're not great. I think it's going to be Josh Shapiro versus Lou Barletta. I support Lou Barletta in the race. I think he'll take on Josh Shapiro, and I think he'll win by like a little less than a point. I think because Lou Barletta really only ran in one huge statewide election, and he got shelled back in 2018. And even that, I just think that the Democrats in Pennsylvania always seem to have a slight advantage. The rural ancestral Democrats in Pennsylvania seem to be very strong for governor races for whatever reason. It always appears that way, and Tom Wolf is actually relatively popular in Philadelphia with Democrats. So I think he'll win. He's the Democrat. Josh Shapiro will be a tough challenge, but I think the GOP, based on the national environment and just to be Lou Barletta being a solid candidate, should be able to win. In the state of Maine, the former governor Paul LePage, the Republican, is challenging the current governor Janet Mills. I think Paul LePage will beat Janet Mills. He's solid on the issues. He'll get turnout in both the rural Republican areas, the more liberal, more moderate areas of the state. Polls have this race razor thin, and Paul LePage, he seems like a good guy. Maine's a trending Republican, and Paul LePage managed to win with the rules basically being 50-50. And now he's up against a Democrat with the rules basically favoring him, and he's going to do very well in the more suburban parts near like Portland and near the coast, the more heavily populated areas. He's originally from that part of the state. I think he'll do pretty well there, and he'll dominate the rules with the working class voters just being pissed at the Democrats and rising hikes of inflation, regulations on businesses, stuff like that. So I think Paul LePage is relatively socially conservative as well. So he's actually a solid candidate. I really hope he wins. So this is the 2022 governorship predictions based on today, which is May 6th of 2022. Hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to like and subscribe for more.